Hello and welcome to the HIPAA Vault show, where we discuss all things HIPAA compliance and cloud technology. I'm joined as always by Gil Vidals. Hey, Gil.
Hey, Adam, good to see you again.
Great to see you too. Today we are going to be discussing changes in the VMware licensing, and we're also going to be touching on the latest breach of the week, a ransomware attack, and stick around till the end where we talk about that and give you more info on it. So to kick us off, the headline that we're starting with today is VMware end of availability of perpetual licensing. VMware end of availability of perpetual licensing and SaaS services. So this is from the VMware.com blog. Many VMware software solutions will only be offered as part of VMware Cloud Foundation, and they will not be available for purchase as standalone products. It looks like towards the end of last year, Gil, VMware was acquired by Broadcom. And at that time, they'd stated that they were looking at shifting their models. They previously had both a perpetual license setup where you could buy a license one time and then just pay a regular kind of support and maintenance fee, and that you own that license. They also had a SaaS-based model where it was a monthly license fee, all built in. And they said that they were deciding which one to shift towards, and they were going to be removing one. There was speculation at the time, and I think it was warranted that, of course, it was going to be they were going to favor the SaaS services because that's, the modern way. And it looks like over the past couple of weeks that's been confirmed. It was actually, reported here earlier this year. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing the feedback, or what would be the right term here?
It's called the backlash. The backlash.
Yeah, the backlash. There we go. The
backlash. Because some of the companies. First up, the audience understands that perpetual license means that you buy the license, you own it perpetually, means forever. But you do pay a support maintenance fee, for example. That's smallish. But now they're saying, oh, forget that. And really software, the modern software is all in the cloud, and it's always based on a subscription. Like you pay every month, forever. Every month you're paying. And that's a better business model, especially when Broadcom spent how many billions of dollars to buy VMware. They got to make up all that money they spent. So obviously going for a subscription model is a lot better, to the behest of the customers that aren't happy with that. And if you go up 1,200%, that's ridiculous. Or no, not 1,200. Yeah, 1,200%, 1,200.
Yeah, that's right. VMware costs increase as much as 1,200% for certain product bundles. So what's happening here is there could be some customers that were, smaller. They're partners of VMware, and maybe they're not the biggest companies in the world, and they were able to license previously based on a small number of cores. But now to serve smaller businesses, they're now required to buy 3,500 cores. So if they were running on, let's say, they were only offering 100 cores, now the minimum threshold is 3,500 cores. So that's where those kind of large
that's crazy.
Increases are coming from.
Yeah, I remember in the day we were really heavily using VMware, you would pay a license based on how much RAM you were consuming in your environment. So you would add up all the virtual machines RAM, whatever that is, then you would pay roughly $5, $6 per gigabyte of RAM. It's a big hefty price. But VMware is not inexpensive. I mean, they have good product and they charge a decent amount for it. So Broadcom wants to charge what they feel is right.
Yeah, and it looks like customers who have purchased perpetual licenses can still use their products until the contract ends. So that, may be today, or it might be in a year or two, depending on how long the contract is. And that will determine how big a headache it is right now for the customer. But it's certainly something that's going to need looking into.
Right.
Gil, what are your thoughts on the impact of this in the, let's say, medium to long term? Will companies start to go to, let's say, VMware's direct competitors, like, for example, Nutanix, second biggest market share, or will they start to look at maybe moving away from private cloud offering?
Well, there was a time where everybody was starting to go into the cloud, moving away from having to lease and rent your own equipment, and there was a big movement for that. And then there was a bit of a pause because some companies realized, wow, in the cloud it's pretty expensive. When we had it in our own data center, they have a bunch of equipment. They paid for the equipment, so there's no monthly fee. So there was some kind of a balancing where they said, well, maybe we'll put some stuff in the cloud, but some stuff we'll keep in our own data center. So it kind of slowed down. But I think now with this kind of a change, I think that the costs to go into the cloud are probably going to be closer to what the data centers were charging, because you add these license fees and it's a lot of money. So I think you're right. I think at some point these customers are going to say, let's just go to the cloud, right? We don't need to pay all these crazy fees. And in the cloud, you have big advantages. You have huge advantages because you don't have to maintain your own equipment. Maintaining your equipment is very difficult because you have to have employees that live near the data center, right? They can't just log in from anywhere. They have to drive to the data center to repair fiber optics cables and change disks and fix things. And so they have to be physically located at proximity to the data center. And that could be very expensive. If your data center is in Southern California, you're paying top dollar to have those employees nearby. So I do think that there's going to be a wave of companies that were on the fence, and now this is going to push them over.
Yeah, and bringing this to healthcare specifically, there's a large number of healthcare companies using these systems and VMware systems. So that is going to be a decision, I think, you're right, over the next coming months and years as to switching to the public cloud. What things should businesses that are considering shifting to public cloud consider, maybe specifically when it comes to the sensitivity of the data that they currently have stored in their existing environment when migrating? And yeah, I know that we've had a lot of inquiries recently about shifting to the cloud. So what kind of advice could you give when talking about sensitive data and migrating?
Yeah, well, I think there's a silver lining to a dark cloud, right? So if you're one of those companies that is getting hit by this avalanche of costs, right? It may not hit you today, but gradually you're going to be paying more and more and more to VMware. So the silver lining is that finally you have a good reason. You've been thinking about going to the cloud. Your costs are now going up dramatically in the data centers. And so going to the cloud is looking more appealing to you. So the good news is that the security in the cloud is usually better than what you could do in your own data center. Even though you may have good security already, let's say you have spent a lot of money on security devices and software and all of that. But in the cloud, you're going to get excellent security, likely better than what you had before, because it's hard to compete with billion-dollar companies, right? They have a lot more money to throw at these problems. So anyway, you'll end up very likely with a better and more secure environment as long as you follow best practices. So there are configuration settings within the cloud providers that you do have to enable in order to protect your data. So you are going to have to train some of your staff to know what to do there, or hire somebody who's an expert already in the cloud that you choose. So I would just say move to the cloud, but ensure that you have some expertise in security. HIPAA Vault specializes in that. So our plug for ourselves is, of course, we help companies do this all the time. That's why they come to us, because they don't have time to review all this stuff. They want to just be able to focus on their application, on their platform, and they let us do all of that infrastructure and security work for them. So that's another option. You could pay a third party to do that for you. Yeah, so when you're planning the move and you're planning the migration from your current, say, on-prem to the cloud, you're going to want to take an assessment, an inventory of what you have. And of course, segment and figure out how much of your data is sensitive data. Then once you go to the cloud, the advantage is there's a lot of things in the cloud that have become a service now. So even though you may have an expensive server sitting there with this big chunk of metal, in the cloud, there are things like, for example, Cloud SQL. So you don't need to have a big beefy Microsoft SQL box sitting there. You could use the cloud service. And so that's a benefit to you, because then you don't have to maintain that system yourself. So there'll be some advantages. Now, as far as the sensitive data that you have, and you're going to host that, that's where you really need to pay attention to figure out, well, where's my data going to live in my new environment? It's going to be, in a well-protected environment. And not all the providers, Adam, have 100% HIPAA compliance. What I mean by that is the vast majority of what they offer is HIPAA compliant, FedRAMP certified, PCI certified, all that. But you have to look at the list. Like, they publish a list. They'll say all of these services, all A through Z, these are HIPAA compliant. But then if it's not on the list, then it's not HIPAA compliant. So you have to look at that carefully, because not every single service is on the list.
I hope we've covered a fair amount there about the VMware licensing changes and what the potential would be for next steps about moving from potentially private to public cloud. Next up, we've got our breach of the week. And our breach of the week for this week is Ascension ransomware attack affecting 142 hospitals. So Ascension is the largest non-profit Catholic health system in the United States. And it's announced it is investigating a suspected cyber attack that's disrupted clinical operations. This was on May 8th that it announced it. Since then, and as reported by Steve Alder, our HIPAA journal, the Ascension, who have 142 hospitals, 40 senior living facilities, and more than 2,600 care sites in 19 states and DC, said that unusual activity was detected on May 8th, and it's confirmed now on it confirmed on May 13th that it was a ransomware attack that affected operations at its 142 hospitals. So we're talking at least hundreds of thousands of records here, if not in the millions, because I've also seen people as far as like Texas starting litigation. So it seems like this is across the US. Ransomware attack. It looks like they're using the hackers used code and ransomware software developed by Blackbuster. Blackbuster is I'd never heard of this before. I'm sure you have though, Gil. RAS, ransomware as a service offering. So they'll rent you or sell you ransomware code for as little as like $40 a month. So you can focus on what you do best, hacking people. So wow. It's Blackbuster. The hackers got into the systems, installed this ransomware, and then now they're holding hundreds of thousands of records.
Did they? Do we know if Ascension paid the ransom?
Not yet. No, that hasn't been reported on yet.
Yeah. We know that one of the previous stories you were telling about ransomware, you said that they did actually pay. Yeah, there's a big bucks here.
Yeah, there are.
I think the people charging $40 a month for this software should charge a little bit more, I think.
100%. Well,
the payout is $20 million for $40.
The more payouts there are, the higher the ROI, right? It's crazy that this is, the dark web, it's a business model, isn't it?
I know I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, because I think a lot of people I still think are living in the world of Hollywood, where they see a hacker in the attic of their home with a hoodie on, one single guy. And that kind of hacker still exists today, but that's not what we're talking about in these cases. This is organized crime, and these organizations have managers, mid-level managers, technicians, engineers that, by the way, were a lot of those were educated at MIT or Stanford and the best universities. These are well-funded funded organizations because they're making a killing. They're making what, 22 million, 10 million. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So they're well organized and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, these are effectively the pirates of the 21st century. If you think back to the 1600s, 1700s, where you had the golden age of piracy.
Yeah,
pirates would get on a ship together and go and go treasure hunting.
Yeah.
This is effectively what it is. And one thing I think as well to note is that the golden age of piracy, if you've read any history, it was really accelerated by disenfranchised soldiers and sailors who lost, they maybe a war ended, and they were out of jobs, so they went and hopped on a ship and started to earn a living. For this kind of business here, there's going to be a lot of people, especially over the past year or two, that have been laid off from tech jobs, the recession as well, and they might have a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth and a lot of skills. So I think this is only going to get worse over the next coming months and years. What do you feel?
I hadn't thought about it that way. That's an interesting view that you bring on, where they need work and they're looking for that. Now, usually though, these kind of attacks of well-organized crime, it's usually nation states. So you're looking at nations that have the government knows about the organized crime. They're paid off, so they don't step in to stop it. They're benefiting from it. So the nation states, they do this and they can get away with it, and they're not worried about their own government coming down hard on them. They're just, as long as they're paying out to everybody, they're doing well. So it's a very difficult problem, and it's affecting the patients. Some of these patients can't get the care they need because the systems are down and this problem. And so it's a pretty serious thing. I think strongly that Congress is going to start passing some kind of laws that they're going to try to force better security. And there's already talks about that. Now, exactly how that's going to work, I don't know. All these hospitals need is more fines if they don't follow regulations. That's not going to help a lot. But
what are your recommendations for the? I mean, we're talking a very high level here, but for the man on the ground, two-factor authentication. What else?
Well, okay. This is a good one, because if you look at these attacks and how they get in, there are quite a few of them that have gotten in through software like TeamViewer, where it's software that's running on a server inside the company, and they use that software to allow others to get in. So they make a connection. And the companies also have that to connect out to others to fix their technical problems. So you could have a technician, in other words, that might be able to log into the hospital servers remotely to work on that server without having to drive into the hospital, right? So that software is meant to tunnel in from the outside and allow an engineer or systems administrator to work on something. It's very practical, because if you have something urgent, the guy says, well, I'm in traffic, I'll just stay home and fix it, right? I don't need to drive 2 hours. But what happens to that software? It's left running. Literally, it's just left running 24/7. And some of this ransomware people, they do is they get onto that software that's already a tunnel into the servers. And once they get into that software, because they found vulnerabilities in this remote access software, they found vulnerabilities in that kind of software. And then once they're in that server that has tunnels into the hospital, now the world's their oyster. They can do whatever they want, install their ransomware, encryption stuff. So the moral of the story there is, look, if you're going to use that kind of software, you better really know what you're doing, because having your employees remote into those kind of servers, it's probably not worth it, or you need to think of a different way. There are different ways to do it. There's private public keys, other methods that probably are a lot better.
I like that. If you're going to give access, make sure you know what you're doing before you do it. We also advise you to share, and subscribe the podcast. Let a friend know about it if you enjoyed any of the content in it. And until next time, thank you for stopping by.